From the frozen taiga to the arid steppes, across landscapes that demand ultimate resilience, a legend is forged. A legend whispered in the shadows, spoken of in hushed tones across military academies, and observed with a mixture of awe and apprehension by nations worldwide. They are the Spetsnaz, the Russian Special Purpose Forces. But who are these individuals? What drives them? What is the crucible that transforms ordinary men into instruments of extraordinary precision and unparalleled discipline? Forget everything you think you know about elite soldiers. This isn't about brute strength alone, nor just about advanced weaponry. This is about something far deeper, something ingrained in the very soul of a warrior. It's about a mental fortitude so profound, a physical endurance so extreme, that it redefines the limits of human capability. Today we peel back the layers of secrecy not to reveal tactical secrets, but to understand the philosophy, the unforgiving regimen, and the iron will that shapes the most disciplined soldiers on earth. This is a journey into the heart of their training, a glimpse into the making of legends. Before we dive into this incredible story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. We want to hear from our global audience as we explore this fascinating world. Our story begins not in a bustling barracks or a high-tech simulation room, but deep within the unforgiving, snow-laden forests of Siberia, a place where the very air can feel like a weapon. Here, hidden from satellite eyes and curious minds, lies one of the most brutal initial selection camps for what will become the elite of the elite. For Sergeant Volkov, a grizzled veteran whose eyes held the wisdom of countless operations, this frozen expanse was his second home, and his sacred duty was to break men down to their absolute essence, only to rebuild them stronger, sharper, and utterly unwavering. The recruits, fresh-faced but determined, arrived with varied backgrounds, some from decorated military families, others from harsh industrial towns, all united by a burning desire for something more, a thirst for belonging to an order beyond the ordinary. They stood shivering in thin fatigues, the biting wind cutting through their layers, their breath misting in the -30°C air. Volkov's voice, a low growl that carried surprising authority, cut through the silence. "You think you're strong?" he challenged, his gaze sweeping over the huddled figures. "You think you have courage? This place will show you how little you know. This is where your spirit will be tested, not by an enemy you can see, but by the enemy within. Your fear, your weakness, your doubt." The first week was designed purely for attrition. It was a relentless assault on the senses and the body, a constant state of discomfort and deprivation. Sleep was a luxury rarely afforded, meals were meager and infrequent, and the physical demands were relentless. They ran for miles through deep snow, carrying logs that weighed as much as a grown man. They crawled through icy mud, enduring the chill that seeped into their bones. They practiced close-quarters combat with numb fingers, their bodies screaming in protest, yet Volkov demanded perfection. He watched for the subtle signs of cracking, the momentary hesitation, the flicker of despair in their eyes. For him, every single movement, every decision, was a window into their true character. He wasn't looking for the strongest man, but the man with the strongest will. The first few days saw a steady stream of recruits dropping out, defeated not by the exercises themselves, but by the relentless psychological pressure, the feeling of utter hopelessness that Volkov deliberately cultivated. This was just the beginning. The true test of their individual resolve, however, came during the isolation phase. Each recruit was left alone in a designated, unmarked section of the vast, silent forest with only a basic survival kit: a knife, a small fire starter, and a single day's ration. The objective was simple yet profoundly challenging: survive for 3 days, navigate back to a designated rendezvous point, and avoid detection by the omnipresent trackers, seasoned Spetsnaz veterans whose skill at silent movement and camouflage was legendary. The forest itself became a living antagonist. The cold intensified at night, forcing recruits to desperately seek or build rudimentary shelters. The constant threat of hypothermia was compounded by the gnawing hunger and the pervasive psychological toll of solitude. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sounded like an approaching tracker, elevating their stress levels to an almost unbearable degree. One recruit, a young man named Sergei with a quiet demeanor but an unyielding spirit, found himself huddled beneath the exposed roots of a massive pine, shivering violently as a blizzard rolled in. His hands, numb with cold, struggled to light a fire, the damp wood refusing to catch. Despair threatened to engulf him. Yet, in that moment of near collapse, he remembered Volkov's words: "The forest is a mirror. It reflects your inner strength. If you break, it's not the forest that broke you, it's yourself." Sergei closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and visualized the warmth of a fire. He focused on the smallest, driest tinder, meticulously shaved off fine splinters, and with painstaking effort finally coaxed a tiny flame to life. That small victory, that defiance against the elements, was a turning point. It wasn't just about survival, it was about the assertion of will over adversity. The trackers were more than just a physical threat. They were a constant psychological pressure, a reminder that they were never truly alone, never truly safe. Many recruits were caught, not always physically, but by leaving tracks or failing to maintain proper cover. These failures, while not resulting in immediate expulsion, earned them grueling corrective exercises, a constant reminder that perfection was the standard. Once the recruits navigated their way back from the wilderness, a new, equally brutal phase began: the team cohesion under duress training. Volkov understood that individual resilience was only half the equation. A Spetsnaz unit was only as strong as its weakest link, and absolute trust in one's comrades was paramount. This phase began with an exercise known as the Endurance March, a non-stop, 72-hour trek across varied, challenging terrain, all while carrying full combat loads, including simulated wounded comrades on stretchers, and performing continuous tactical drills. Sleep deprivation was a constant companion, blurring the lines between reality and hallucination. The goal wasn't just to complete the march, but to do so while maintaining peak operational efficiency, making critical decisions under extreme fatigue, and supporting every member of the team. One particular scenario involved crossing a freezing, waist-deep river in the dead of night. The current was strong and the water was so cold it stole their breath. A simulated ambush occurred mid-crossing, forcing the exhausted team to not only secure their positions but also extract a wounded comrade from the treacherous water, all while their gear became heavy with the icy burden. Volkov observed from the bank, his expression unreadable. He looked for arguments, for signs of impatience, for any breach in the unyielding commitment to the team. He deliberately introduced failures, planting saboteurs who would covertly impede progress, drop essential gear, or feign injury at critical moments. These were tests of patience, communication, and unwavering commitment to the mission above personal frustration. One recruit, a powerful but occasionally hot-headed man named Ivan, grew visibly frustrated when his partner, struggling with exhaustion, fumbled with a crucial piece of equipment during a simulated extraction under fire. Ivan's first instinct was to snap, to criticize. But he caught Volkov's piercing gaze and remembered the repeated mantra: "Your comrade's failure is your failure. Your comrade's success is your success." Instead, he calmly took the equipment, silently demonstrated the correct procedure, and encouraged his partner with a firm but reassuring nod. This was the moment Volkov had been waiting for: the transformation from individual to integrated unit, where ego dissolved into collective purpose. Following the physical and psychological grinding of the endurance phase, the recruits moved into the mental fortitude and interrogation resistance module, a critical component of Spetsnaz training that delved into the darkest corners of human endurance. This wasn't about mock interrogations in a classroom, it was about replicating the sheer terror and systematic degradation faced by a captured operative. Recruits were blindfolded, bound, and subjected to days of sensory deprivation, psychological manipulation, and simulated physical stress. They were deprived of sleep, exposed to disorienting sounds and lights, and fed conflicting information to erode their sense of reality. The purpose was not to teach them how to withstand specific torture techniques, but to develop an inner sanctuary of resilience, a mental fortress that could not be breached, regardless of external circumstances. Volkov, often acting as one of the interrogators, employed a variety of tactics. He would cycle between aggressive demands, subtle psychological profiling, and even false empathy, trying to exploit any perceived weakness or emotional vulnerability. He searched for the breaking point where a man's identity began to unravel. One exercise involved being submerged in freezing water, just short of hypothermia, while loud, disorienting noises blasted around them, and a constant stream of questions pounded their minds. The physical discomfort was extreme, but the real enemy was the despair, the feeling of helplessness, the erosion of their will. A recruit named Dmitri, known for his calm, analytical mind, found himself in such a situation. His teeth chattered uncontrollably, his muscles spasmed from the cold, and his mind felt like a tangled mess of confusion. Yet he focused on a single, unwavering thought: his mission. He mentally recited his cover story, visualized his escape plan, and repeated a silent mantra of defiance. Volkov, observing Dmitri's unyielding gaze despite the physical torment, recognized the rare strength. This wasn't about resisting pain. It was about resisting the desire to break, the ultimate triumph of the mind over the body's primal urges. The ability to control one's own narrative, even under extreme duress, was a cornerstone of their discipline. The culmination of this initial brutal selection process was the trust fall, an exercise deceptively simple in its name but profound in its psychological impact. It wasn't about falling backward into waiting arms, but about entrusting their lives to their comrades in scenarios where failure meant grave consequences. One iteration involved navigating a treacherous, booby-trapped obstacle course in complete darkness, guided only by the voices of their teammates who could see the path through night vision goggles from a distant, elevated observation post. The recruits were blindfolded, their ears filled with static to simulate comms interference, amplifying their reliance on spoken commands. The trust had to be absolute, instantaneous, and unwavering. A single misstep, a moment of doubt, could trigger a simulated explosive device or a fall into icy water. Volkov watched with hawk-like precision, noting every hesitation, every argument, every moment where individual fear superseded collective faith. He deliberately introduced minor errors into the guide's instructions, forcing the blindfolded recruits to use their intuition and trust their teammates' corrections, even if it initially sounded contradictory to their own perception. The objective was to teach them that sometimes to survive, you must fully surrender control to those beside you, believing completely in their judgment even when your own senses scream otherwise. During one particularly harrowing sequence, a recruit named Mikhail, notoriously independent and self-reliant, found himself frozen mid-course. His guide's voice, distorted by static, commanded him to step onto what felt like thin air. Every instinct screamed danger. But then he heard the calm, insistent voice of his partner, confirming the instruction, reinforcing the trust. Mikhail took the step, and his foot landed firmly on a hidden platform. The profound relief and the surge of camaraderie that followed transformed his understanding of teamwork. It was no longer a theoretical concept. It was a visceral, life-affirming bond forged in shared peril. This exercise sealed the unspoken pact between them. They were no longer just individuals. They were a single, unbreakable unit, bound by discipline, trust, and an absolute commitment to each other's survival. With the initial selection complete, the surviving recruits moved into the specialized combat disciplines phase, where their physical and mental resilience would be honed into razor-sharp operational skills. This wasn't just about learning techniques, it was about internalizing them to the point where they became instinctual, executed with flawless precision even under the most extreme conditions. One of the primary focuses was on close-quarters battle, CQB, within urban environments. They trained in abandoned industrial complexes and simulated city blocks, filled with unpredictable threats and civilian actors. The scenarios were designed to be as chaotic and realistic as possible, using live ammunition in controlled, albeit intensely dangerous, environments where a single mistake could be fatal. Volkov, now overseeing rather than directly instructing, brought in veteran Spetsnaz operators who had seen countless real-world engagements. These instructors, with their scarred faces and quiet intensity, taught everything from breaching techniques and room clearing to hostage rescue and high-value target extraction. The recruits learned to move as one fluid entity, a ballet of controlled aggression, where hand signals were exchanged with blinding speed, and every team member anticipated the next move of their comrades without verbal command. One intense exercise involved clearing a multi-story building believed to contain armed insurgents. The recruits had to navigate dark stairwells, breach reinforced doors, and neutralize targets with split-second decision-making. The pressure was immense, compounded by simulated casualties among their own ranks and the presence of innocent civilians whose safety was paramount. The instructors deliberately introduced curveballs, unexpected counterattacks, hidden traps, and rapid changes in the intelligence brief. The goal was to force them to adapt instantly, to trust their training and each other, even when the situation spiraled into apparent chaos. The discipline here was in the unwavering adherence to procedure, the elimination of hesitation, and the absolute focus on the objective, no matter the distraction or the danger. The line between training and reality blurred, preparing them for the brutal efficiency required in actual combat. Beyond urban warfare, the training regimen extensively covered asymmetric warfare and counterterrorism operations, preparing them for a vastly different, often more insidious type of conflict. This involved extensive modules on intelligence gathering, infiltration and exfiltration techniques, surveillance, and direct action against unconventional threats. Recruits were taught to operate covertly in enemy territory, blending in with local populations, establishing networks, and conducting surgical strikes with minimal collateral damage. The emphasis was heavily on adaptability and resourcefulness. They underwent rigorous training in disguise and deception, learning to adopt local mannerisms, dialects, and even religious customs to maintain their cover. This required not just linguistic skill but a deep cultural understanding, a far cry from the stereotypical image of a brute soldier. One particularly challenging exercise involved a simulated mission to neutralize a high-ranking terrorist leader in a heavily guarded, foreign-aligned embassy. The recruits had to plan the entire operation from scratch, relying solely on limited intelligence, creating their own cover identities, and conducting reconnaissance without raising suspicion. They practiced scaling walls silently, bypassing advanced security systems, and executing their mission within a strict, unforgiving time limit. Volkov stressed that in asymmetric warfare, the enemy rarely played by the rules, and thus, Spetsnaz operatives had to be prepared for anything. This included advanced training in demolitions, not just for breaching, but for precision targeting, planting charges that would achieve maximum effect with minimal disruption. They learned to identify and disable improvised explosive devices, IEDs, with cold, steady hands, understanding that a single misstep could cost lives. The discipline here was multifaceted. The intellectual discipline to plan meticulously, the cultural discipline to blend seamlessly, and the emotional discipline to remain utterly detached and objective in the face of complex, morally ambiguous situations. They were becoming ghosts, moving unseen, striking with lethal precision, and vanishing without a trace. The next demanding phase was dedicated to advanced marksmanship and sniper tactics, elevating their weapon proficiency to an art form. This went far beyond mere target practice. It was about becoming one with the rifle, understanding ballistics, windage, and even the subtle vibrations of their own heartbeat. They spent weeks in remote firing ranges, enduring punishing conditions, rain, snow, extreme heat, to achieve absolute mastery. Snipers, in particular, were trained to operate in isolation for extended periods, enduring physical discomfort and intense psychological pressure to deliver a single, critical shot. They learned to calculate complex trajectories, accounting for every environmental variable, and to remain absolutely motionless for hours, sometimes days, blending perfectly into their surroundings until the moment of truth. One legendary instructor, a former Spetsnaz sniper with a reputation for impossible shots, taught them the art of cold-bore accuracy, making the very first shot from a cold rifle hit its mark perfectly. This required meticulous preparation, mental focus, and an almost spiritual connection to their weapon. Recruits would spend hours observing their targets through scopes, learning to read subtle cues, anticipating movements, and controlling their breathing to such an extent that their heartbeat slowed. During a grueling sniper competition, 2 recruits, working as a spotter-shooter team, were tasked with engaging targets at extreme distances, partially obscured by dense fog with varying wind conditions. The spotter, navigating complex wind calculations and target movement, had to relay precise corrections to the shooter, who then had to execute the shot with unwavering calm. The discipline was in the patience, the absolute control over their own physiology, and the seamless, unspoken communication between the two. Volkov emphasized that a Spetsnaz sniper was not just a shooter. He was an intelligence gatherer, an observer, and a force multiplier, capable of changing the tide of an engagement with a single, perfectly placed round. Their marksmanship was not just a skill, it was a testament to their unwavering discipline and their capacity for extreme precision under pressure. Survival for the Spetsnaz wasn't just about staying alive. It was about thriving in the most hostile environments imaginable, and thus the extreme environment operations training was crucial. This covered everything from Arctic and desert survival to jungle and mountain warfare, ensuring they could operate effectively anywhere on Earth. In the Arctic, they learned to build snow shelters that could withstand blizzards, hunt and fish in frozen landscapes, navigate by the stars without instruments, and prevent frostbite in conditions where exposed skin could freeze in minutes. They conducted long-range patrols on skis and snowshoes, often hauling heavy sleds, constantly monitoring each other for signs of hypothermia or exhaustion, pushing the limits of human endurance in the harshest possible climates. In the scorching deserts, they learned water procurement techniques, how to move silently across shifting sands, identify edible plants and animals in seemingly barren lands, and operate under the relentless sun. They trained in desert camouflage and evasion, understanding that in such open environments, stealth was their most potent weapon. One particularly brutal exercise involved a 100-kilometer desert crossing with minimal water, forcing the recruits to ration every drop, carefully plan their movements to avoid the midday sun, and rely on their training to find hidden oases or subsurface water sources. Volkov's instructors taught them that the environment itself was a powerful ally if understood and respected, and a lethal enemy if underestimated. The discipline here was not just physical, but also mental. The ability to endure discomfort, to maintain morale in the face of desolation, and to apply learned survival principles even when the body screamed for respite. It was about developing an almost primal connection to the land, an understanding that allowed them to become extensions of their surroundings, masters of any terrain. The capstone of their individual and team development was the final assessment, the Iron Road. This was not merely an examination of skills, but a comprehensive, multi-day, non-stop simulation of a real-world, high-stakes operation in a contested zone. Recruits, now operating as fully formed units, were given a complex mission brief: infiltrate enemy territory, gather critical intelligence, conduct a precision strike on a key target, extract a high-value asset, and evade pursuit through a gauntlet of enemy forces. The Iron Road threw everything at them. They faced simulated ambushes from multiple directions, requiring rapid response and coordinated movements. They encountered chemical warfare scenarios, forcing them to don protective gear and continue their mission under severe physical and sensory limitations. They navigated minefields, crossed treacherous rivers under fire, and performed medical aid on simulated casualties, all while under intense psychological pressure from constant harassment and sleep deprivation. Volkov and his senior instructors meticulously designed the enemy forces to be relentless and unpredictable, played by hardened Spetsnaz veterans who knew every trick in the book. The recruits had to make split-second decisions with incomplete information, adapt to rapidly changing circumstances, and push their bodies and minds beyond what they believed possible. One crucial moment during the Iron Road involved a critical communications failure, forcing a team to revert to old-school navigation and hand signals to coordinate a complex extraction under heavy fire. The discipline honed over months of training shone through. The ability to remain calm amidst chaos, to trust their instincts, and to rely on the unspoken understanding forged in shared hardship. The Iron Road wasn't about finding weaknesses. It was about confirming that no weakness remained, that every recruit had achieved the absolute pinnacle of discipline, resilience, and operational readiness. They were no longer just men, they were Spetsnaz. Beyond the brutal physical and mental crucible, the intellectual discipline instilled in Spetsnaz operatives is arguably their most understated yet powerful asset. This isn't a force built on blind obedience, but on highly educated, critically thinking individuals capable of analyzing complex geopolitical situations and making nuanced decisions under extreme pressure. Their training includes intensive courses in foreign languages, cultural anthropology, international relations, and advanced intelligence analysis. They are taught to dissect propaganda, identify subtle shifts in political landscapes, and understand the motivations of diverse populations. The ability to speak multiple languages fluently, often including obscure dialects, allows them to operate deep within foreign territories, gather human intelligence, and establish rapport with local contacts. This intellectual rigor extends to their tactical planning. Before any operation, Spetsnaz units undergo exhaustive briefing and scenario planning sessions, where every potential variable is considered, every contingency planned for. They are encouraged to question, to challenge assumptions, and to propose alternative approaches, fostering a culture of continuous improvement and intellectual curiosity. Volkov often cited the importance of mental map-making, the ability to create and update complex geopolitical and cultural landscapes in their minds, allowing them to anticipate threats and opportunities long before they materialize. One scenario involved analyzing a vast array of open-source intelligence, local news reports, social media posts, economic data, to identify a hidden arms cache in a volatile region. The recruits, using their language skills and cultural understanding, pieced together seemingly disparate clues, identifying subtle patterns that a less disciplined or less intellectually trained operative would miss. This deep-seated intellectual discipline transforms them from mere soldiers into strategic assets, capable of impacting outcomes far beyond the immediate battlefield. The mastery of diverse martial arts and unarmed combat techniques is another cornerstone of Spetsnaz discipline, not just for physical prowess, but for the psychological edge it provides. They are trained in a unique blend of Sambo, a Russian martial art and combat sport, Systema, a less formalized, more fluid combat system focused on natural movement, and various other close-quarters combat disciplines. The training emphasizes not brute force, but efficiency, speed, and the ability to adapt to any opponent or situation. Every movement is economized, every strike precise, aimed at neutralizing a threat with minimal effort. This mastery is not just for direct engagement. It builds incredible body control, situational awareness, and the ability to remain calm and collected in chaotic hand-to-hand confrontations. Volkov's combat instructors were often retired Spetsnaz legends, men whose movements were like liquid, their strikes like lightning. They taught that the true power lay not in aggression, but in control of one's own body, control of one's emotions, and control of the engagement. Recruits spent countless hours grappling in mud, fighting in pitch darkness, and sparring against multiple opponents, often with limited visibility or impaired senses. The objective was to strip away reliance on sight or sound, forcing them to feel their opponent, anticipate their movements, and react instinctively. One brutal exercise involved a gauntlet, where recruits had to fight their way through a series of continuously attacking, padded instructors in a narrow corridor, simulating a desperate escape. They had to defend themselves, break holds, disarm threats, and maintain forward momentum, all while their stamina was pushed to its breaking point. The discipline was in the relentless practice, the unwavering focus on technique, and the ability to maintain composure even when physically overwhelmed. This close-quarters combat mastery instilled an unshakable confidence, a knowledge that they could face any threat, armed or unarmed, and emerge victorious through skill and sheer force of will. The Spetsnaz's relationship with technology is one of profound understanding and ruthless efficiency. They are not simply users of advanced equipment. They are masters who push its boundaries and, when necessary, operate entirely without it. Their training includes in-depth education on cutting-edge reconnaissance tools, encrypted communication systems, drone operation, cyber warfare fundamentals, and advanced electronic countermeasures. They learn not only how to deploy these tools but also how they work, how to maintain them in hostile environments, and how to counter similar technologies used by adversaries. This technical literacy ensures that they are never entirely dependent on a single system, always ready with a low-tech backup or an improvised solution. They spend countless hours in simulated combat zones, operating complex sensor arrays, analyzing real-time data feeds, and integrating information from multiple sources to build a comprehensive picture of the battlefield. The discipline here is in the meticulous attention to detail, the understanding of complex systems, and the ability to quickly adapt to technological failures or evolving enemy countermeasures. Volkov's tech specialists often challenge the recruits with blackout scenarios, suddenly cutting off all electronic communication and navigation, forcing them to rely on traditional methods like map reading, compass use, and silent signals. This reinforced the principle that while technology was an invaluable force multiplier, the human element, the trained, disciplined operative, remained the ultimate weapon. One advanced exercise involved using micro-drones for urban surveillance, identifying hidden enemy positions, and relaying real-time intelligence to a ground team preparing for an assault. The recruits had to pilot these drones with surgical precision, evade simulated enemy electronic warfare, and interpret the visual data accurately, all while under time pressure and the threat of detection. This blend of high-tech mastery and primal self-reliance encapsulates the comprehensive nature of their training. Perhaps the most profound aspect of Spetsnaz discipline is their adaptive resilience, the capacity to not just survive but to thrive in constant change, both tactical and environmental. This isn't about being prepared for specific scenarios, but about being prepared for anything. Their training regimen is designed to be constantly evolving, reflecting new threats, new technologies, and new doctrines. They are perpetual students, never complacent, always seeking to refine their skills and expand their knowledge base. This adaptive mindset is fostered through relentless exposure to unpredictable situations. Mission parameters can change mid-operation, intelligence can prove false, and expected support can vanish, forcing the operatives to improvise, innovate, and achieve their objectives with whatever resources remain. This resilience is also deeply psychological. They are taught to manage extreme stress, to control their fear, and to maintain an unwavering focus on the mission regardless of personal cost or comfort. Volkov famously stated, "The disciplined mind is the ultimate weapon, for it can adapt where all else fails." They engage in fluid scenario drills, where the enemy composition, objectives, and environmental conditions can shift at a moment's notice, forcing them to replan and execute on the fly. One particularly challenging exercise involved a simulated rescue mission that suddenly transformed into an offensive strike, then a defensive hold, all within a matter of hours, forcing the team to transition rapidly between tactical doctrines and operational mindsets. This constant state of preparedness, this readiness to embrace the unknown and turn it into an advantage, is what truly sets them apart. It is a testament to a level of discipline that permeates every fiber of their being, enabling them to be effective in any theater, against any adversary, under any circumstances. They are the epitome of adaptive warfare. The journey through the crucible of Spetsnaz training culminates not in a graduation ceremony, but in a lifelong commitment to an ethos of unwavering discipline and selfless service. The men who emerge from this relentless process are not merely highly skilled soldiers. They are philosophers of warfare, masters of their own bodies and minds, and embodiments of absolute dedication. Their discipline isn't about rigid adherence to rules for their own sake, but about the profound understanding that every single action, every decision, every sacrifice contributes to the collective success of the mission and the protection of their homeland. They represent the pinnacle of military professionalism, a force forged in the fires of extreme hardship and tempered by an unyielding spirit. This discipline is evident in their quiet confidence, their precise movements, their analytical gaze, and their unwavering loyalty to their comrades and their country. It is a discipline that transcends the battlefield, permeating their entire lives. They learn that true strength comes not from outward aggression, but from inner calm, from the ability to control one's own fears and weaknesses, and to channel every ounce of their being towards a singular, critical objective. Volkov, observing his seasoned Spetsnaz teams in action, saw not just soldiers, but living testament to the human capacity for excellence, forged by a system that demands nothing less than absolute perfection. They are the silent guardians, the unseen force, the disciplined elite who stand ready to answer the call, wherever and whenever their unique capabilities are required. Their legend is not just a tale of power, but a testament to the extraordinary heights that human discipline can achieve.